by far and away one of the most contentious moments in all of Naruto is Shisui's death. Naruto fans were so unable to conceptualize how Shisui would have died in combat against Danzo, so blown away by the concept that somehow, someway, Danzo was able to speed blitz Shisui and yank out one of his eyes, that Kishimoto literally had to dedicate a large part of Itachi's second novel to explain exactly how Shisui died on the night of that fateful confrontation with Danzo. See, in the light novel, we're told a rather different story from the story that we're told in the anime. See, because in the light novel, rather than just Danzo showing up to his meeting with Shisui and Shisui telling him he wants to use Kotoamatsukami on Fugaku to turn Fugaku into somebody who's more sympathetic with Konoha's cause, Danzo actually shows up to that meeting in the light novel with two of his top assassins. The more important of which being Yoji Aburame. And Yoji Aburame is revealed to have access to a ridiculously broken insect that is not only basically undetectable as it's the size of a mosquito, but also whose bite packs a ridiculously powerful punch. A punch that not only paralyzes those who are bitten, but also poisons them with enough poison to kill them eventually. And not only is the bite from this insect enough to paralyze some of the strongest ninja in existence, like Shisui, and fill them up with enough poison that their death is guaranteed, but also this poison that's able to take out a high-ranking member in the Anbu is also completely untraceable. And thus it's revealed in the light novel that the reason that Danzo was able to speed blitz Shisui and steal one of his Kotoamatsukami wasn't because Danzo was just so much more powerful than Shisui. No, it was because Shisui made the fatal mistake of trusting Danzo. And Danzo, before he flew over to Shisui to yank out one of his eyeballs, paralyzed him using Yoji Aburame. And not only does this explanation explain why Danzo was able to get the drop on Shisui, but it also explains why Shisui handed over his other eye to Itachi and threw himself into a waterfall. See, because if you're just watching the anime, it seems kind of odd that Shisui just decides to die after losing an eye, but in the light novel, it's revealed to us that Shisui knows he's gonna die because of the poison in his system, and therefore he wants Itachi to have his other eye, and he wants Itachi to awaken his MS by finishing him off. But what if this moment had played out differently? What if this moment had played out probably the way that it should have? What if rather than Danzo getting the drop on Shisui, it was Shisui getting the drop on Danzo? I mean, I think we can all acknowledge the fact that in the moment of this meeting, Shisui was the massively more powerful out of these two men, especially when you consider the fact that the Uchiha massacre hadn't happened yet, and therefore Danzo didn't have access to his 17 lives. And therefore, honestly, Danzo shouldn't have been the person claiming victory on that fateful night. It should have been Shisui. So what if things had played out like they were supposed to? What if Shisui killed Danzo instead of the reverse? I mean, while we're talking about it right here, right now, this seems like a small, somewhat rational change to Naruto's story, right? A battle happens between two people. One of those two people is massively more powerful than the other, and therefore the person who is massively more powerful should win that fight. However, that rather small, very rational change to Naruto's story does not have a small or rational effect to Naruto's story. Well, yes, we can all acknowledge that Shisui and Danzo were very important characters in Naruto's history. I don't think a lot of you can conceptualize just how important this individual moment is, which is why today we're talking, what if Shisui killed Danzo? But before we get to talking any hypotheticals, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you're looking for one additional NC Hammer 23 video every single week, you guys can go ahead and find my Naruto reaction series using the fourth wall link in my description below. We're on to Neji versus Hinata. So, in order for us to best understand what would happen if the shoe ended up on the other foot on this fateful night where Shisui and Danzo met to talk about how they could deal with the Uchiha clan, we have to understand why this meeting was happening in the first place. See, the reason this meeting was set up, and this meeting was set up by Shisui, mind you, was because Shisui wanted to tell Danzo, who he was working with to spy on the Uchiha 4, that he was planning on using his Mangekyo Sharingan ability, the Kotoamatsukami, on Fugaku at the next Uchiha clan meeting to force Fugaku into being more sympathetic or possibly just more cooperative with Konoha. Now, that's a plan that Shisui kind of hatched by himself, but also kind of hatched with Itachi. And while undoubtedly two of the most powerful Uchiha in the entire clan were on board for this idea, Danzo didn't believe, or rather didn't want to believe, that this plan would work. And therefore, he tells Shisui that his eyes are better utilized in his possession. Now, on account of the fact that the light novel highlights to us that Danzo brings two of his root assassins to this meeting, it's probably fairly safe to assume that Danzo was always planning on killing Shisui at this meeting. And therefore, as to whether or not Danzo actually believed Shisui's plan would work is probably irrelevant. Danzo went to this meeting with one plan and one plan alone, and that was to steal the Kotoamatsukami from Shisui. However, what if Shisui had planned for Danzo's betrayal? What if Shisui was able to leave this meeting with Danzo, not only with his life, but also both of his eyes? And what if over the course of this battle against Danzo, he was able to kill him? Well, while we can't know for certain, we can make an educated guess. See, we know that those who are under the effect of Kotoamatsukami have their chakra flow disrupted. And that disrupted or irregular chakra flow is identifiable by people who are able to see chakra flow or chakra networks. The best use case of this being Byakugan users. Now, this is proven to us when Danzo tries to use Kotoamatsukami on Mifune, the leader of the Land of Iron and all of the samurai, during the 5 Kage Summit in the lead up to the 4th Great Shinobi World War. See, Danzo tries to control Mifune, who's brought in as an impartial third party, into swaying all the other Kage and devoting Danzo as the new leader of the Shinobi Alliance. Or I guess not new leader, but like first leader of the Shinobi Alliance. However, Ao, who was the aide of the Mizukage, the 5th Mizukage, Mai, uses a Byakugan that he stole from a Hyuga member during, I believe, the 3rd Great Shinobi World War to look at Mifune and see if there was something wrong with his chakra network. And lo and behold, there was. Ao was able to pretty much all but immediately identify the fact that Mifune was under a genjutsu. And because chakra has signatures that are unique to certain individuals, Ao was able to tie this disruption in Mifune's chakra flow to the eye in Danzo's head. And thus, even though Danzo said that the Kotoamatsukami would be better suited in his possession, the one and only time that Danzo ever tries to use Kotoamatsukami, his plans are all but immediately foiled. Immediately proving, unfortunately for Danzo, I guess, that Kotoamatsukami isn't nearly as broken as we thought it was. Well, yes, even without eye contact, you're able to place somebody under genjutsu so complete that they don't even know that they're being controlled. Unfortunately, Kotoamatsukami still operates under the same rules as general genjutsu. That is to say that it disrupts your chakra flow, and if somebody can see your chakra flow, they're able to break you out of it. So if hypothetically Shisui survived this battle against Danzo, went to the Uchiha hideout, participated in the meeting, and then placed Fugaku under Kotoamatsukami, well, yes, Shisui probably would have been able to use it against Fugaku, even though he was a Mangekyo Sharingan user, and therefore has an inherent resistance to Sharingan-based genjutsus. There's a possibility that somebody who would be able to see Fugaku's chakra network, somebody like a Byakugan user, could see that Fugaku had been placed under genjutsu and break him out of it, undoing all of the hard work of both Itachi and Shisui. However, of course, up until he is broken out of the genjutsu, he would be more compliant and more cooperative with Konoha. And who's to say any Byakugan user is going to activate their Byakugan while looking at Fugaku? They have no real reason to do that. I mean, yes, the Hyuga are an incredibly powerful clan, but they wouldn't be involved in any kind of conversation between the Uchiha and Hiruzen. So if, hypothetically, Shisui did use Kotoamatsukami on Fugaku, there's a fair chance that he would be under the effect of it for a fairly long time. But there are those who believe that the only reason that Mifune was A, able to be broken out of the genjutsu he was placed under by Danzo, and B, was able to be identified as being placed under genjutsu by Danzo is because Danzo got the weaker of 2 Kotoamatsukami eyes. See, the theory states essentially that Shisui's 2 Kotoamatsukami eyes did not fundamentally work in the same way. Yes, they were both able to place people under a complete genjutsu that was so ridiculously powerful even they didn't know they were placed under it. However, the strength of these 2 genjutsus varies based off the eye using it. One of the eyes, the eye that Danzo got, is able to manipulate people completely, even without eye contact. However, those who are able to see chakra flow are able to see if somebody has been placed under the effect of this genjutsu, and therefore they're able to break people out of the effect of this genjutsu. But because of this, the trade-off for this eye is the fact that Kotoamatsukami can be used way more often than the other Kotoamatsukami, the Kotoamatsukami that Itachi got. A Kotoamatsukami so ridiculously powerful that not only does it operate in the same way as the other Kotoamatsukami, that is to say that it can operate without eye contact, and it brainwashes people so completely that they don't know that they're under the effect of genjutsu. However, the effects of this Kotoamatsukami are permanent and unidentifiable. And this is why Itachi was able to use this Kotoamatsukami to break himself out of the effect of Edo Tensei forever. And also why Itachi decided to destroy the crow that held on to this Kotoamatsukami, because he understood that it would basically not be usable again for another decade, maybe even multiple decades. However, this is unfortunately just a theory. The only evidence we have indicates that anybody who's able to see the flow of chakra or the chakra network should be able to see if somebody is under the effects of Kotoamatsukami. And the second that they're able to identify that that person is under the effect of a genjutsu, they're able to break that person out of a genjutsu as easily as they would be able to with literally any other genjutsu. And unfortunately for Shisui, if anybody were to be able to identify that Fugaku had been placed under the Kotoamatsukami, because, like I said earlier, every chakra signature is unique, they would be able to track back the genetic signature future of Kotoamatsukami and Fugaku back to Shisui all but immediately. So using the evidence that we do have, we have to assume that if Shisui did use Kotoamatsukami on Fugaku, it would not only be identifiable, but also reversible. But does that matter? Like we established earlier, there's really no reason for a Byakugan user to be staring at Fugaku with their Byakugan activated. And unfortunately, yeah, it does matter, like a lot. See, because while the Sharingan can't sense and track chakra on the level of the Byakugan, it absolutely can perceive chakra flow. It can even perceive chakra flow through physical objects, like rocks and trees. And while it can't see the chakra network as well as the Byakugan, and it can't see chakra points to stab using Gentle Fist, being able to perceive chakra flow means you're able to perceive disrupted chakra flow. And therefore, users of the Sharingan would be able to see with relative ease, mind you, that Fugaku's chakra isn't flowing like it should be. And therefore, it wouldn't take a Byakugan user, and rather, it would only take a Sharingan user to identify that Fugaku had been placed under genjutsu. And, there's a whole lot of reason for an Uchiha member to have their Sharingan activated around Fugaku. And therefore, theoretically, any practiced Sharingan user who looked at Fugaku after he'd been placed under the effects of Kotoamatsukami be able to tell that his chakra flow had been augmented, he had been placed under genjutsu, and then immediately break him out of it. They'd also be able to identify that Shisui was the person who did it. At which point, rather reasonably, they would try to kill Shisui. So what would happen if Shisui killed Danzo and then used Kotoamatsukami on Fugaku? Well, the Uchiha probably would have at least tried to kill him. But Itachi probably would have fought alongside Shisui because Shisui held on to the majority of his loyalties inside of the clan, which most likely would have led to the decimation of the Uchiha clan again. I mean, after all, Itachi alone was able to wipe out the entirety of the fighting force of the Uchiha clan. Throw Shisui in there, and yeah, it's not gonna be pretty. And sure, if you throw Shisui in there and sprinkle on the fact that this all started because Shisui used a genjutsu on Fugaku without Fugaku knowing, Fugaku's probably gonna get in the mix of the battle. That doesn't really matter. The end result is that the vast majority of the Uchiha clan's gonna be decimated in some kind of civil war. Unless you can understand why I've said for the last couple of years that Shisui's plan was dumb. And not only that Shisui's plan was dumb, but that Danzo wasn't necessarily wrong when he said that the Kotoamatsukami were better suited in his possession. But that's not much of a what if. It's boring. It's me saying, hey, listen, if this different thing happened, the same result would happen. So what if, hypothetically, those who believe that the two different Kotoamatsukami had two different levels of strength, and therefore Shisui would have access to an untraceable, unbreakable, outable, that's not how you would say it, but you get it, version of the Kotoamatsukami he could use on Fugaku. Or maybe, just maybe, the change in chakra flow of somebody placed under the effects of Kotoamatsukami is too small for a Sharingan user to identify. Well, then, yes, Fugaku would be forced into a mindset of being more cooperative with Konoha. And thus, there is a fair to decent chance, especially because Danzo would be dead in this universe, at some point in time, Fugaku and Hiruzen would have a conversation about mending the relationship between the Uchiha and Konoha. This claim is backed by the fact that it's not really until Danzo's evils are exposed to Hiruzen, it begins to realize just how far gone the Uchiha actually were. See, Danzo was controlling the Uchiha situation by himself. He contracted Shisui and Itachi to spy on the Uchiha for him and relay any and all information about their movings back to him. And while it was believed by Itachi and Shisui that this information was making its way back to Hiruzen, it absolutely was not. However, with Danzo out of the way, a discourse would absolutely begin between Hiruzen and the leaders of the Uchiha clan, but most likely just Fugaku. Maybe Fugaku, Itachi, and Shisui, as they would be the leaders in the let's all get along plan from the Uchiha side. However, unfortunately, the likelihood of this conversation yielding positive results isn't high, because the Uchiha wouldn't be the only thing that Hiruzen would have to worry about. See, with Danzo dead at the hands of an Uchiha, no less, the Uchiha would become target number one for the Root, who had an insane amount of loyalty to Danzo. Even in the actual timeline, when Hiruzen strips Danzo of his leadership of the Root after he finds out what he did to the Uchiha clan, the Root basically says, hey Hiruzen, we're not going to be loyal to you, we're still going to be loyal to Danzo. The Root basically, up until Danzo's death, and even after Danzo's death, have no loyalty to Konoha. The entirety of their loyalty boils down to Danzo. The best example of this is Sumere's father, Tanuki, who literally committed his entire life after Danzo died to destroying Konoha with the project that he was working on for Danzo because Konoha forgave Danzo's killer, Sasuke. And thus the entire reason that the Gezo Tenno and Nue are used against Konoha through the medium of Sumere is because of the Root's blind loyalty to Danzo. And I am fairly certain that if Konoha and Hiruzen forgave Shisui for killing Danzo, the Root would launch an attack either against the Uchiha Konoha, or both. What's even worse than that is that even if Fugaku was forced into being more cooperative with Hiruzen and he tried to quell the anger amongst the Uchiha clan for the injustices that they believe had been launched against them by Konoha, that doesn't mean that the entire Uchiha clan would follow him. Well, yes, obviously, Fugaku held on to a profound amount of respect in the Uchiha clan. If you read the light novels, you'll see that Fugaku wasn't necessarily a hardliner for the coup. See, Fugaku was forced by those around him to become the figurehead of the coup. Sure, he was the chief of the Uchiha and the face of the Uchiha, and him arguing for non-violence might have swayed some of the more influential members. Remember, this is the Uchiha. They have a genetic predisposition to anger, and the cycle of hatred was far from over at this point in time. Not to mention that they have an established track record of throwing out previously respected members of their clan. Madara, after the founding of Konoha, tried to tell the Uchiha that they were being taken advantage of. But rather than join Madara in his battle against Konoha, they cast him out. If Fugaku did meet with Hiruzen and did try to stamp out the flames of rebellion amongst the Uchiha, there is a fair to decent chance he would have been labeled as a traitor, stripped of his title of chief of the Uchiha, and thrown out of the clan. And really, the only way that Hiruzen would have been able to stomp out the flames of the rebellion would be to make some everlasting changes for the Uchiha in Konoha. Changes like allowing other people to join the Konoha police force, so maybe some of the Uchiha could go work in other fields, allowing the Uchiha to live outside of the confines of their village, publicly apologizing and admitting to the Uchiha that they had nothing to do with the releasing of Kurama on the night of Naruto's birth. Or maybe, and this is the most extreme option that was open to Hiruzen, but undoubtedly the one that would have worked best, stepping down from his role as Hokage and giving the title over to Fugaku. And while all of these options were technically possibilities that Hiruzen could have done, I doubt he would have done any of them. After all, it was Hiruzen who sent the Uchiha to live by themselves, cordoned off in a village far on the outskirts of the city. He held up the Uchiha police force that Tobirama created, and he had every opportunity to hand over the role of Hokage to Fugaku after Minato died. Literally years. So what would happen if Shisui was able to kill Danzo and placed Fugaku under successful Kotoamatsukami? Well, more likely than not, the coup still happens. And if the coup doesn't happen and the Uchiha and Konoha work together to mend their relationship, the root most likely launches a coup that Konoha and the Uchiha have to work together to stamp out. In either scenario, Konoha is ravaged by civil war that weakens it to the point where old rivals, like the Stone Village, take this opportunity to break their armistice and finally, once and for all, stamp out the threat that is the Leaf Village. All that is to say, as wild as it sounds, there is no iteration of Shisui's plan that works. And Danzo, in this one moment, might have actually been correct. And listen, I understand that that opinion might offend some of your delicate sensibilities, so please take this opportunity to tell me how I might be wrong in the comments below. And while you're down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. If you'll excuse me, there's some sushi calling my name.